Look at her, still on her knees back there, like she was born for it.
Someone said she looks like a dancer.
With that posture. I don't want any trouble, ma'am. I'll be finished in a moment. No trouble at all. Actually, you want to stand on a stage built for artists? Earn it. I'm just cleaning, ma'am. People like you don't get to just clean. You get to know your place and then go back to it. But if you think you belong up here, prove it, right now, in front of everyone.
Please, I
insist. Maestro! Play something for our guest. Let's see what people like her call talent.
Laughter breaks fully across the room now. Unguarded, ugly under the polish. Amara rises slowly, sets the dustpan down, peels off one glove, then the other, folding them with a stillness that doesn't match a single face watching her. Vivian tilts her head, delighted, savoring it. Well, everyone's waiting. Amara looks at her for a long moment, says nothing. Then dance. 2 hours earlier, the Royal Crown Ballet Theatre glittered under 1,000 watts of chandelier light. Velvet seats, gold trim, a stage polished to a mirror shine for the company's 40th anniversary gala. Every seat sold out weeks in advance. Every critic in the city seated in the front 6 rows. Vivian Sinclair danced the closing solo of Giselle to a standing ovation that lasted 4 full minutes. She'd danced it 100 times before, in 100 cities. But tonight's crowd didn't know that, or didn't care. They only knew what they'd just watched. And what they'd watched was, by any reasonable measure, extraordinary. Backstage, in the narrow hallway behind the wings, Amara Carter moved through her usual routine, unnoticed the way she'd learned to be unnoticed years ago. Navy uniform, hair tied back, a cart of cleaning supplies she pushed with the same quiet efficiency every night, whether the house was full or empty. Marcus Lewis, the young stage technician coiling cable near the fly system, glanced at her as she passed. Big crowd tonight. Always is for the anniversary show. Amara didn't slow down. You heading home after? Or, he hesitated. He'd seen her once, months ago, long after the theater had emptied, moving across the dark stage in ways that had nothing to do with a broom. Turns and extensions that belonged in a company class, not a cleaning shift. He'd stood in the wings that night and watched longer than he should have, saying nothing, some instinct telling him it wasn't his to interrupt. He'd never mentioned it. He didn't mention it now either. Home, Amara said. Samuel has an exam in the morning. I want to be there when he leaves. Elena Rossi, seated in the second row during curtain call, watched Vivian's bows with the practiced eye of a woman who'd once stood on that same stage herself, decades earlier, before her knees gave out and her career became teaching instead of performing. She applauded like everyone else, but something in her attention drifted, briefly, toward the wings, toward a figure in navy moving quietly at the edge of the light, carrying herself with a posture Elena's trained eye couldn't quite stop noticing, even from that distance. The line of the shoulders. The way the woman's weight settled through her heels rather than her toes, even while pushing a cart across an empty stage. Elena had spent 30 years teaching young dancers to move exactly like that. It wasn't a posture you picked up by accident. She didn't think much of it. Not yet. There would be time, she told herself, to satisfy her curiosity later, once the reception settled and the crowd thinned. For now, there were donors to greet, old colleagues to embrace, the usual choreography of a gala evening that had nothing to do with the stage itself. The reception began 20 minutes after final curtain. Patrons and critics and board members flooding onto the stage itself for champagne and photographs beneath the same lights that had just held Vivian's performance. Daniel Whitmore, chairman of the Royal Crown Ballet, moved through the crowd shaking hands, thanking donors, doing the quiet math he always did at these events. How many checks would clear by Monday? How many new names might join the board this season? How many more years the company's reputation could coast on Vivian's name alone before someone new needed to carry it? It was a server's tray, overloaded and unsteady near the edge of the platform, that finally tipped. Champagne flutes crashing across the stage floor in a wide arc of glass and gold liquid. Gasps rippling through the nearest guests before laughter smoothed it over into an anecdote for later. "Someone get this cleaned before the photographs," Daniel said, already turning back to his conversation. The mess already forgotten the moment the words left his mouth. Amara arrived within a minute, cart in tow, kneeling at the edge of the mess with the same unhurried care she brought to everything. She didn't look up at the guests, stepping carefully around her, murmuring apologies for the inconvenience of her own presence in their path. She simply worked, glass by glass, the way she'd worked 1,000 nights before this one, in 100 venues that never once asked her name, never once wondered what she carried underneath the uniform. Vivian, still glowing from her ovation, champagne in hand and admirers circling close, noticed her first, and something about the sight of her, kneeling, quiet, unbothered by the room around her, struck Vivian as an opportunity too easy to resist. That's when the laughter started. The theater doesn't go quiet. Not yet. If anything, the laughter grows louder in the seconds after Vivian's challenge, guests turning toward each other, delighted by the unexpected entertainment, phones already rising to capture whatever happens next. "This should be good," someone murmurs near the front. "Oh, come on, Vivian. Be nice," another says, though nobody moves to actually stop her. Amara stands at the center of the stage, gloves folded neatly in one hand, and for a moment, she doesn't move at all. The lights above her are brighter than she remembers lights being. The floor beneath her feet is the same floor she's mopped 100 times. The same boards she's polished until they caught the house lights just right for tomorrow's matinee. Except tonight, for the first time in 6 years, she's standing on them rather than beneath them. Somewhere behind her ribs, something old stirs awake. She remembers her mother's voice first, not words exactly, just the particular cadence of counting beats, aloud in a small studio, with peeling paint, a woman who'd saved for 11 months to afford her daughter's first pair of proper point shoes. She remembers her instructor's hands correcting her shoulder blades, the exact pressure, the exact patience. She remembers being 19, a full scholarship offer in hand, the kind of future that felt less like a possibility and more like an inevitability. She remembers exactly which morning that future ended and whose hospital room she was sitting in when it did. She remembers signing the paperwork that let her become Samuel's guardian instead of a professional dancer. Remembers packing away her point shoes in a box she never opened again. Remembers telling herself it was a door closing quietly rather than one being slammed. 6 years of quiet has a way of convincing a person the door was never really theirs to walk back through. None of that shows on her face. Amara has spent 6 years learning how to keep it from showing. "Well?" Vivian's voice carries easily across the stage, delight barely concealed beneath mock patience. "We're all waiting." Marcus, still near the fly system, has gone very still. He knows what's coming, or thinks he might, though even he isn't fully certain. He's only seen fragments, stolen glimpses through a gap in the curtain on nights he stayed too late, watching a woman move through routines in an empty theater that had nothing to do with mopping floors. He's never seen her dance for an audience. He's not sure anyone alive has, not for 6 years. He finds himself gripping the cable in his hands, tighter than necessary, holding his breath without meaning to. Elena leans forward in her seat without realizing she's doing it, some old instinct sharpening beneath 30 years of teaching, watching the way Amara's weight settles, watching the small, almost imperceptible adjustment of her spine that has nothing to do with nervousness and everything to do with preparation. "Something's not right about this," Elena murmurs to the colleague beside her. About what? The joke? About her posture. The conductor, baton raised but hesitating, glances toward Daniel Whitmore for guidance. Neither of them quite knows how to give. This isn't part of any program. There's no score prepared for whatever this is supposed to be. Daniel hesitates a beat too long, caught between stopping something that's clearly become cruel and not wanting to embarrass Vivian in front of 200 paying donors. "Play something," Vivian says again. Sharper now, impatience creeping into the performance of her own amusement. Anything. Let's not keep our guest waiting. The conductor lowers his baton. The first notes rise slowly from the strings. Something simple. Something meant as a punchline more than an accompaniment. Chosen almost carelessly. The way you'd hand someone a prop rather than an instrument. Amara closes her eyes for exactly one breath. When she opens them, something in her expression has changed, though it takes a moment for anyone in that audience to place what. It isn't defiance. It isn't anger. It's something closer to permission, the particular stillness of a person finally allowing themselves to become, for just a few minutes, exactly who they used to be before the world asked her to be someone smaller. The laughter in the room is already beginning to falter, though nobody could say exactly why yet. Something about the way she's standing, something about the silence she's carrying, instead of the shame everyone expected to see. Her arms rise, not the stiff, uncertain gesture of someone play-acting at a skill they don't possess. Something else entirely. Controlled, deliberate. The unmistakable first position of a dancer who has done this 10,000 times before, whose body remembers the shape of it, even after 6 years of trying to forget. Somewhere in the third row, Elena Rossi's breath catches audibly enough that the woman beside her turns to look. The music continues. Amara's feet find the floor the way water finds the lowest point in a room. Inevitable, unhesitating, arriving exactly where it was always going to arrive. And then, for the first time all evening, the theater goes completely, genuinely silent. The first phrase of movement is simple. A slow extension, a controlled turn. Nothing that should stop a room this size from breathing normally. A few scattered laughs still ripple near the back. Guests who missed the shift in the air, still expecting a punchline, still waiting for the maid to stumble, to prove the joke was worth setting up. This is actually kind of sad to watch. Someone near the bar murmurs, smirking, phone raised for a different kind of video than the one he's about to end up recording. But something about the way Amara executes that first extension makes the air feel different, tighter, like the whole theater has quietly leaned forward without deciding to. The laughter near the back falters, not because anyone's told it to, but because it no longer has anywhere comfortable to land. Vivian's smile is still in place, but it's begun to look less like amusement and more like something held there by habit rather than intention. Amara moves into a series of pirouettes, unhurried, each one landing with a precision that draws a small, involuntary sound from somewhere in the third row. Her arms carve the air with a softness that doesn't match the brutality of the last few minutes at all, as though the stage itself has offered her a kind of forgiveness nobody in this room thought to extend. That's not amateur technique, a critic near the aisle murmurs to his companion, phone forgotten in his lap. That's conservatory training. Look at her spotting. She's a maid. I heard you the first time. Look at her spotting anyway. Confusion moves through the room next, replacing the laughter in patches, guest by guest, table by table. Nobody says the word out loud yet. Nobody quite has language for what they're watching. But the expressions shifting across 200 faces all carry some version of the same question. How is this happening? 2 rows back, a woman in a designer gown, who'd been among the loudest laughing minutes earlier, now sits with her hand pressed to her mouth. Phone still raised, but no longer to capture a joke. Something in her expression has shifted from anticipation of comedy to the slow, uncomfortable recognition that she may have participated in something considerably crueler than she intended. A younger critic beside her leans forward, elbows on his knees, entirely forgetting the notes he'd been jotting about Vivian's earlier performance. Is this choreographed? Did someone plan this? Nobody planned this, his companion says quietly. That's exactly the point. The orchestra, still playing the simple accompaniment chosen as a joke, begins adjusting almost imperceptibly to match her. The conductor leaning into the tempo she's setting rather than the one written on the page, sensing, the way good musicians sense these things, that something far larger than the evening's planned entertainment is unfolding in front of him. He catches the eye of the lead violinist, a silent exchange passing between them. both suddenly playing with a seriousness neither expected to bring to what should have been a 5-minute joke. Amara rises onto point, though she's wearing nothing but simple flats. The cleaning uniform still fitted plainly around her frame. No costume, no preparation, nothing but 6 years of memory translating itself back into muscle in real time. It shouldn't be possible to convey that kind of extension without proper shoes. She does it anyway, through sheer control, through a command of her own body that no amount of laughter in the room can touch. The laughter has stopped entirely now. Nobody in the audience is quite sure when it stopped, only that it has, the confusion of the previous minute finally resolving into something else. A silence that feels less like awkwardness and more like reverence. The specific quiet that settles over a room in the presence of something people don't fully understand, but recognize, instinctively, as rare. It happens all at once, and gradually at the same time. A hand lowers a phone without finishing the recording. A conversation dies mid-sentence, near the bar, the second half of it simply abandoned. Even the servers, weaving carefully through the standing crowd with their trays, slow their steps without quite meaning to, drawn toward the stage the way anyone is drawn toward something they don't want to risk missing. Marcus watches from the wings with his jaw slightly open, cable forgotten in his hands entirely now. He'd seen fragments before, through a gap in the curtain on nights he stayed too late. He'd never seen the whole of it, never seen what 6 years of empty theater practice actually adds up to, when finally given a full stage and an audience holding its breath. Elena Rossi has risen slightly out of her seat without realizing it, hand pressed flat against her chest, watching a sequence of movement she hasn't seen performed with this particular signature in over a decade. Not since she stopped teaching at the conservatory that produced it. Amara's body moves through a sequence of jumps now, each one carrying more height than should be physically possible, in flat shoes on a stage this slick with leftover champagne. And yet she lands each one silently, controlled, as though gravity itself has agreed to cooperate with whatever she's telling her body to do. A donor near the front, a man who sits on 3 separate arts boards across the city, turns to his wife with an expression she's never seen him wear at any performance in 20 years of marriage. "I've funded companies for 2 decades, he says quietly. I have never seen extension like that. She's the maid, Robert. I heard you. He doesn't look away from the stage. I don't care anymore. Daniel Whitmore stands frozen near the edge of the stage, champagne glass abandoned somewhere behind him, watching with the particular horror of a man beginning to understand, in real time, the scale of what's unfolding in front of 200 witnesses, and however many phones are now recording every second of it. Some part of him is already calculating consequences, board reactions, press coverage, the particular kind of scandal that doesn't fade quickly. A larger part of him has simply stopped thinking about consequences entirely, caught, like everyone else in the room, in the pure fact of what he's watching. Vivian hasn't moved from where she stood when she issued the challenge. Her champagne glass hangs forgotten in one hand, condensation sliding unnoticed down her fingers. The smile is gone now, entirely, replaced by something far less comfortable. The dawning, unwelcome understanding that whatever she thought she was setting up as a joke has become something else completely, something she no longer has any control over. Amara's movements shift into something slower now, an adagio sequence built from extended lines and controlled balances that require a stillness far harder to achieve than any of the turns or jumps that came before it. This is the part of ballet that separates technicians from artists, the ability to hold a moment, unsupported, and make an audience believe the stillness itself is the point. Elena watches this part most closely of all, because this is the part that can't be taught quickly, the part that takes years to earn. A young dancer visiting from out of town, seated near the back with her own mother, grips the older woman's arm without looking away. Mom, look at her arabesque line. I see it. That's not just good. That's..." The girl doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't need to. By now, the silence in the theater has fully transformed into something closer to awe. An entire room, collectively suspending judgment, expectation, and everything they thought they understood about who belonged on that stage 20 minutes earlier. Even Vivian's most loyal supporters, scattered throughout the front rows, find themselves leaning forward without quite meaning to, caught in the same current pulling everyone else toward the same unavoidable conclusion. The music swells toward its natural conclusion, though nobody chose this piece for the ending it's about to receive. Amara's final sequence unfolds slower, more deliberate, each movement carrying the particular weight of 6 years of grief and discipline and love for a younger brother she never once regretted choosing over a stage like this one. Though watching her now, nobody in the room could mistake this for regret. This is something closer to homecoming. Every extension looks less like performance and more like a conversation she's having with a version of herself she thought she'd left behind permanently, 6 years and 1,000 mopped floors ago. Her final position holds for a long moment. Arms extended, chin lifted, breath controlled despite everything her body has just done. The music fades into silence around her. Nobody claps, nobody moves. 200 people sit frozen in a theater that, 10 minutes ago, was laughing at the idea that this woman could possibly belong on this stage. Elena Rossi is the first to speak, though her voice barely carries beyond the row immediately around her, hand still pressed against her chest, eyes fixed on Amara, with an expression that has nothing to do with pity and everything to do with recognition. "I've seen that technique before," she whispers. Elena's words don't reach far, but they don't need to. Something has already begun moving through the room on their own. The recognition passing quietly from person to person, the same way the laughter did 20 minutes earlier, except this time carrying an entirely different weight. 6 years earlier, in a rehearsal studio 3 states away, a 19-year-old Amara Carter stood at the bar while her instructor, Madame Yulia Petrova, corrected the line of her arabesque for the 100th time that week. "Again," Madame Petrova said, "you're rushing the extension. Ballet doesn't reward speed, Amara. It rewards patience." Amara reset, breathed, tried again. Madame Petrova nodded once, the closest thing to praise she ever gave, and worth more to Amara than applause from anyone else in the building. "The Kirov Scouts will be here in March," Madame Petrova said, already moving toward the next student. "You'll be ready." Amara believed her. Everyone in that studio believed her. She'd spent 13 years working toward that march, toward a scholarship offer that had already arrived on the family's kitchen table, toward a future that felt, for the first time in her life, entirely within reach. The phone call came on a Tuesday in February, 4 weeks before the Scouts were scheduled to arrive. Her mother had collapsed at work. A stroke, sudden and severe, the kind that reorganizes a family's entire future in the space of a single afternoon. Amara left the studio in her practice clothes and didn't return for 3 weeks, sitting instead in a hospital room, watching machines breathe for the woman who'd saved 11 months of grocery money to buy her first pair of point shoes. Her mother survived. She never fully recovered. Samuel was 11 at the time, old enough to understand that something was badly wrong, too young to understand what it would cost his older sister to fix it. Their father had been gone since Samuel was a toddler, a name mentioned rarely, and without bitterness, simply a fact of their family's shape rather than an open wound. There was no one else, no aunts with spare bedrooms, no grandparents with pensions to draw on. Amara understood this within days of her mother's collapse, the way you understand a fact your entire body already knows before your mind finishes catching up. She called Madame Petrova from the hospital hallway to withdraw from the March audition. "You cannot be serious," Madame Petrova said, her usual composure cracking for the first and only time Amara ever witnessed. "Amara, this is everything you've worked for. 13 years. I know. There will not be another opportunity like this one. The Kirov does not wait, Amara. Companies do not hold scholarships for grieving families. I know that too." Amara's voice didn't shake, even then, even at 19, even with her entire future collapsing in a hospital corridor that smelled like antiseptic and fear. "But Samuel needs someone, and there's no one else. I can't be in 2 places at once. I have to choose, and I've already chosen. She took the first job she could find that paid enough and asked few enough questions about her availability. Cleaning work, first at an office building downtown, eventually at the Royal Crown Ballet Theatre itself, close enough to the world she'd left behind that some nights, after everyone had gone home, she let herself walk out onto the empty stage and remember, just for a few minutes, what her body used to know how to do in front of an audience, instead of alone in the dark. Samuel finished high school 2 years later, near the top of his class, and Amara worked a second job that entire final year to help cover the gap his scholarship didn't quite close. He's 23 now, in his third year of medical school, calling his sister every Sunday without fail, still unaware, even now, of exactly how much of his education was paid for by a woman quietly missing shifts at auditions she never told him existed. Back in the present, the theater remains frozen in its silence, nobody yet understanding the specifics of what Elena has recognized, only sensing, correctly, that whatever it is, it's significant. Daniel Whitmore moves first, slipping quietly backstage, while the room remains transfixed, some instinct pulling him toward his office rather than the stage. He doesn't fully understand why yet, only that something about tonight has stopped being an embarrassing incident and started becoming something he needs actual information to navigate. He pulls Amara's personnel file from the cabinet with hands that aren't entirely steady, scanning quickly past the basic employment details. Start date, department, supervisor sign-offs, a handful of unremarkable performance reviews describing her as reliable and quiet, until his eyes catch on a line near the bottom of the second page, added years ago by an HR administrator who likely never thought anyone would read it twice. Prior training ballet, Ellison Conservatory, 6 years, full scholarship recipient. Withdrew 2018, family circumstances. Daniel sits down slowly in his chair, the file open in his lap, and reads the line again, as though rereading it might change what it says. Ellison Conservatory, 6 years, full scholarship. He knows that name. Everyone in this industry knows that name. One of the most selective training programs in the country, the kind of pedigree that produces principal dancers at major companies, not maids sweeping broken glass off a gala stage. He's interviewed dancers with half her documented training who command salaries 6 times what his theater pays its cleaning staff. He thinks, briefly and uselessly, of every time he's passed her in the hallway without a second glance, every payroll form he's signed with her name on it, without once wondering what came before the date she started working for him. The applause doesn't begin all at once. It starts with a single pair of hands. Elena Rossi, rising fully to her feet now, clapping with the specific intensity of someone who understands exactly what she just watched, even if the rest of the room is still catching up. One person becomes 3. 3 becomes a dozen. Within seconds, the entire theater is on its feet. Applause building into something closer to a roar. The same guests who were laughing at Amara 20 minutes earlier, now standing, shouting, some visibly wiping their eyes. Phones raised again. Not to mock this time, but because some instinct tells every person in that room they've witnessed something they'll want to remember having seen. The donor named Robert, still gripping his wife's hand, shouts, "Brava!" loud enough to carry over the general roar, a word he's used 100 times at performances over the decades, but never, he'll admit later, with this much feeling behind it. Near the back, the young visiting dancer is crying openly, her mother's arm around her shoulders, both of them still on their feet. Amara stands at the center of the stage, chest still rising and falling from exertion, and for a moment she doesn't quite know what to do with the sound crashing over her. It's been 6 years since she's heard applause meant for her specifically. She'd almost forgotten what it felt like, the particular way it settles into a person's chest, equal parts overwhelming and unbearably familiar. She doesn't bow theatrically. She simply inclines her head slightly, the small, controlled gesture of someone who was taught, a long time ago, that gratitude and performance are not the same thing. Vivian stands frozen at the edge of the stage, champagne glass still in hand, watching a standing ovation happen for a woman she introduced to this room as a joke less than 15 minutes ago. The sound of it seems to physically press against her. 200 people, her patrons, her critics, the very audience whose adoration she's built an entire career around, now on their feet for someone else entirely. She's received ovations like this before, dozens of times, in theaters across 3 continents. She's never once stood on the receiving end of the silence that comes right before one. The specific dread of realizing the loudest sound in the room no longer belongs to her. A photographer near the front captures the exact moment Vivian's expression shifts from disbelief into something closer to dread, and that photograph will run in 3 separate publications by morning. Vivian. Daniel Whitmore's voice reaches her from just off stage, low, urgent, the file still in his hand. "We need to talk now." She doesn't respond. She's still watching Amara, still trying to reconcile the woman kneeling in broken glass 20 minutes ago with the one currently receiving the loudest ovation this theater has hosted in years. Amara, for her part, doesn't linger in the moment the way most performers would. She glances briefly toward the wings, finds Marcus's face among the stagehands, the only person in the building who ever suspected any of this, and gives him the smallest, most private nod, an acknowledgement meant for exactly one person in a room of 200. Then she turns and begins walking off stage, unhurried, the applause still thundering behind her, refusing to fade even as she retreats toward the wings. "Wait!" Vivian's voice cuts through the noise, sharper than she intends, though there's no cruelty left in it now, only something closer to panic. "Please, wait." Amara pauses at the edge of the stage, not quite turning around. "I need to speak with you," Vivian says, stepping forward, the crowd's applause still rolling over both of them. "Please." Amara turns finally, and whatever the audience expects to see on her face, triumph, anger, vindication, isn't there. Just the same quiet composure she carried while kneeling in broken glass, unchanged by 200 people rising to their feet for her. "I need to get home," Amara says simply. "My brother's expecting me." Amara. It's the first time Vivian has used her name all evening, and it lands strangely in the air between them, like a word Vivian isn't quite sure she's earned the right to use yet. "Please, just a few minutes." Amara studies her for a long moment, the applause finally beginning to settle into something more sustainable. Guests slowly returning to their seats, though the energy in the room hasn't fully released yet, still crackling with the particular electricity of having witnessed something nobody quite has language for. "All right," Amara says quietly. "A few minutes." She continues toward the wings, gloves still folded in one hand, cleaning cart abandoned somewhere near center stage, where she left it before any of this started. Vivian follows a step behind, champagne glass finally set down on a nearby table, moving through the same corridor Amara has walked 1,000 times unnoticed, except tonight, for the first time, someone finally follows her into it. Behind them, the theater remains standing, the applause finally beginning to fade into the low murmur of 200 people trying to process what they just watched, and what it means about everything they assumed 20 minutes earlier. Elena Rossi remains on her feet longest of anyone, watching the space where Amara disappeared backstage, already turning over a single, insistent thought she can't quite shake. A talent like that doesn't simply vanish for 6 years by accident. Something happened to her. And somewhere in this building, right now, that story is finally about to be told. The backstage corridor is narrower than the ballroom-sized world Vivian usually inhabits. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, a single row of dressing rooms with nameplates that have never once included Amara's. Faded posters from past seasons line one wall, Vivian's own face appearing on 3 of them, each one a reminder of exactly how much of this building has been built around her name over the years. Amara stops near the supply closet where her cart still waits, half loaded, exactly where she left it before any of this began. "You didn't have to follow me," Amara says, not unkindly, setting her folded gloves down on a nearby shelf. "I know." Vivian stands a few feet away, arms crossed over herself, in a way that looks less like her usual composed elegance, and more like someone trying to hold something together. "I wanted to." Amara waits. She doesn't fill the silence for her, doesn't offer the easy reassurance most people reach for when someone stands in front of them looking uncertain. 6 years of quietly absorbing other people's discomfort has taught her exactly how much space silence can hold before someone else finally fills it. I don't know how to do this, Vivian admits finally, and it's the first genuinely uncertain thing anyone in the theater has heard her say all evening. I've given interviews for 15 years. I've never once had to figure out how to apologize to someone I humiliated in front of 200 people. You could start with the word, Amara says simply. Vivian's jaw tightens, not from anger, but from the specific discomfort of hearing something true and unflattering stated plainly. I'm sorry. For what, exactly? The question isn't cruel. It's precise. The kind of question that requires Vivian to actually examine what she did, rather than gesture vaguely toward an apology and hope it covers enough ground. For assuming you didn't belong on that stage, Vivian says slowly, working it out as she speaks. For deciding, the second I saw your uniform, that you couldn't possibly have anything worth showing anyone. For making that assumption in front of an entire room and turning you into entertainment because I thought it would be funny. Why did you think it would be funny? Vivian doesn't answer right away. Something in her expression suggests she's genuinely searching for an honest answer rather than a comfortable one. Because I've spent my whole career around people who look a certain way, come from a certain world, she says finally. Conservatories that cost more per year than most families earn. Donors who write checks in 6 figures without blinking. I think some part of me stopped believing greatness could exist outside of that world. I didn't examine it. I just acted on it. The way you act on something you've never once had a reason to question. That's the part that should frighten you, Amara says quietly. Not tonight. Not what happened on that stage. The part where you never had to question it before, because nobody ever made you. Vivian is quiet for a long moment. Somewhere beyond the corridor, faint applause still echoes intermittently as the reception slowly reassembles itself into something resembling normalcy. I'm not going to pretend I'm owed anything from you, Vivian says, but I'd like to try to make this right, if there's a version of that you'd accept. I don't want your money, if that's what you're offering. It's not. Vivian shakes her head. I want to offer you a place. Here, on this stage, properly, not as a joke, not as a spectacle. Ellison Conservatory doesn't produce dancers like what I watched tonight by accident. Whatever happened to your training 6 years ago, it clearly didn't take the actual talent away with it. Amara considers this for a long moment, arms folded loosely. The same composure she's carried through every part of this evening, remaining entirely intact. I have a brother in medical school, she says finally. I have rent, and a job that, whatever you think of it, has fed both of us for 6 years without fail. I'm not interested in charity, and I'm not interested in becoming a story people tell at galas about redemption. I'm not offering charity. Then what are you offering? An audition, Vivian says. A real one, with real instructors, evaluated the same way anyone else would be evaluated. No favors, no story attached to it, beyond what you show on the floor. If you're as good as what I watched tonight, and I think you're better, you'll earn a place here on merit, not on an apology. Amara studies her for a long moment, weighing something Vivian can't quite read in her expression. I'll think about it, she says finally. I'm not deciding anything tonight. That's fair. And Miss Sinclair. Amara pauses at the door, gloves back in hand. This apology doesn't erase what happened tonight for the people who watched it. Some of them will remember the laughing longer than they remember the dancing. I know, Vivian says quietly. I have to live with that too. Amara nods once, and walks out into the corridor toward the exit, leaving Vivian alone beside a cleaning cart, in a hallway that suddenly feels considerably smaller than the stage she just watched someone reclaim, in front of 200 witnesses. Vivian stands there a long moment after the door swings shut, looking at the cart, the folded gloves still resting on the shelf beside it, understanding, for the first time in her career, that the largest reaction she's ever caused in this theater had almost nothing to do with anything she did herself. 6 months later, the Royal Crown Ballet Theatre is sold out again. though tonight's program looks nothing like the anniversary gala that made headlines the previous spring. Amara Carter's name sits on the marquee outside, third billing beneath the two principal dancers, in a company debut that took her 5 months of formal training, evaluation, and rehearsal to earn. No favors extended, no story invoked, exactly as Vivian promised that night backstage. The independent panel Daniel Whitmore assembled to evaluate her scored her technical assessment higher than any candidate the company had auditioned in a decade. Elena Rossi has spent those 5 months as her primary instructor, working with her 3 mornings a week to rebuild 6 years of atrophied strength into something ready for a full company schedule. "You have the technique of someone who never stopped," Elena told her during their first session, watching her execute a combination with the same startling precision she'd shown on that gala stage. "But you're going to need to rebuild the stamina. That part doesn't come back overnight." It didn't. Amara worked through it anyway. The same discipline that carried her through 6 years of double shifts, now redirected toward bar work and conditioning, toward a body remembering, slowly and sometimes painfully, exactly what it used to be capable of holding for a full 2-hour performance, rather than a single 5-minute piece. Samuel sits in the 4th row tonight, in a seat Amara insisted on buying for him months ago, the moment the company confirmed her debut. He graduated from medical school 3 weeks earlier, top of his class, already matched to a residency program that will keep him in the same city as his sister for at least the next 4 years. He's told the story of tonight's performance to nearly everyone in his graduating class. The sister who gave up her own dream so he could chase his, finally getting hers back. "You don't have to explain it like a sacrifice," Amara told him once, gently, when he tried to thank her for the 100th time. "I chose you, Samuel. Every single day. I'd choose you again." "I know," he'd said. "That's exactly why I keep saying it." Marcus Lewis works the fly system tonight. Same as always, though he watches this particular performance with a different kind of attention than usual. The quiet satisfaction of someone who kept a secret for months, because it wasn't his to tell, finally getting to watch it become something the whole world gets to see instead. In the audience, 7 rows back, Vivian Sinclair sits without a program in her lap, without any obligation to be here tonight, beyond the one she's chosen to keep for herself. She isn't performing this evening, a deliberate choice on her part, made months ago, once she understood that some nights aren't meant to belong to her. The lights dim. The orchestra begins. A proper score this time, chosen with intention rather than as an afterthought to a joke. Amara steps onto the stage in full costume, point shoes laced with the same care she once gave a broom and dustpan, and for the first time in 6 years, she dances in front of an audience that came specifically to watch her do it. The performance runs 11 minutes. Nobody in the theater tonight remembers her as a maid. They remember her exactly as what she is, a dancer whose technique draws audible gasps from the critics in the front rows, whose extension and control carry a discipline built from 13 years of formal training and 6 more years of never fully letting go of it, even when letting go would have been so much easier. When the final note fades, the ovation arrives instantly this time. No confusion, no hesitation. Just 2,000 people rising together for a performance that deserved exactly this from the very first movement. Vivian rises with everyone else, clapping until her hands ache, watching a woman she once tried to humiliate receive precisely what she's always deserved, precisely on her own terms. Backstage, after the final bow, Elena finds Amara first, embracing her tightly. "Your mother would be proud of you tonight." "I hope so," Amara says quietly. Samuel reaches her next, lifting her briefly off her feet, the way he hasn't done since he was a teenager, both of them laughing through something that isn't quite laughter. Vivian waits near the edge of the crowd, not pushing forward, simply watching from a respectful distance, until Amara notices her and gives a small, genuine nod. Not friendship exactly, not yet, but something considerably warmer than the silence that passed between them the night this all began. If there's one thing this story leaves behind, it's this. Greatness never waited for anyone's permission to exist. It was always there, in the woman kneeling in broken glass, In The Maid, nobody bothered to really see. The world simply hadn't caught up to what she already knew about herself. Ask yourself honestly, how many people have you walked past today without wondering what they gave up, what they're carrying, what extraordinary thing might be quietly waiting inside them for a stage that never comes? Dignity was never something anyone had to earn. It was something the rest of us simply failed, for too long, to recognize. If this story moved you, subscribe for more, because there are countless people like Amara all around us, quietly carrying greatness the world hasn't bothered to see yet. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next story where dignity finally gets its standing ovation.